HOA cited me for radio noise. Turns out I was monitoring emergency frequencies for FEMA. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? That's exactly what happened to me when my homeowners association slapped me with a fine for radio noise interference in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The citation arrived in my mailbox, accusing my amateur radio setup of disrupting everything from garage door openers to baby monitors. I was stunned. My ham radio wasn't some hobbyist toy, it was my lifeline to critical emergency communications, including monitoring frequencies for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. But the HOA didn't care. They wanted my antenna down and my radio silent. What they didn't expect was the fight I'd bring to prove I was protecting lives, not causing chaos. The trouble started a few months ago when I moved into Willow Creek, a tidy community with manicured lawns and strict rules. As a licensed amateur radio operator, I'd set up a modest 20-foot antenna in my backyard, carefully following FCC guidelines. My setup was nothing flashy, just enough to monitor FEMA's Civil Defense National Radio System frequencies, like 5.212 MHz for night emergencies and 10.494 MHz for daytime. I'd been volunteering with a local emergency response team, relaying critical messages during natural disasters when cell towers and landlines failed. Ham radio operators like me are often the last line of communication in a crisis, and I took that responsibility seriously. But to Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, my antenna was an eyesore and my radio a nuisance. Karen was the kind of person who measured grass blades to enforce the 2-inch lawn height rule. One sunny afternoon, she knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, and informed me that neighbors had complained about strange noises from their electronics. "Your radio tower is causing interference," she said, pointing to my antenna like it was a UFO. I tried to explain that my equipment was FCC compliant and that I was monitoring emergency frequencies, but her eyes glazed over. "You're violating Section 12.7 of the HOA covenants," she snapped. "Remove it, or you'll be fined $500. I was furious but kept my cool. I knew my radio wasn't the problem. Amateur radios operate on tightly regulated frequencies, and I'd installed bandpass filters to minimize interference. Still, I checked my setup that night, running diagnostics to confirm I wasn't leaking signals. Everything was clean. I sent Karen a polite email, explaining my role in emergency communications and offering to meet with neighbors to troubleshoot their issues. Her reply was a form letter. "All exterior antennas are prohibited. Comply within 7 days." The next twist came unexpectedly. At a local ham radio club meeting, I mentioned the HOA drama to a friend, Tom, a retired firefighter who also volunteered for emergency communications. Tom's eyes lit up. "Wait a sec," he said. "Didn't Willow Creek have a power outage last year during the floods?" I nodded. He grinned. "I bet they don't know your radio helped coordinate rescue efforts." Turns out, during that flood, my station had relayed messages to FEMA's multi-radio vehicle, ensuring first responders knew which streets were impassable. Tom suggested I gather evidence of my work and take it to the HOA board. "Make them see you're a hero, not a villain," he said. Armed with Tom's advice, I prepared for the HOA meeting like it was a courtroom battle. I printed logs of my FEMA communications, letters from my emergency response team, and even a copy of the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act, which protects ham operators from overly restrictive HOA rules. I also contacted a neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, who'd complained about her baby monitor. After a quick visit, I discovered her monitor was on an unlicensed frequency, picking up stray signals from a faulty power adapter, not my radio. She was embarrassed and promised to back me up. The meeting was a showdown. Karen stood at the podium, reading complaints from 3 anonymous neighbors about radio noise. She painted me as a rogue operator, disrupting the neighborhood's peace. When it was my turn, I stood tall and started with a question. "How many of you knew that during last year's flood, my radio helped save lives?" The room went silent. I walked them through my FEMA work, showing logs of messages sent on 7.349 MHz to coordinate aid. I explained how ham radio is a lifeline when disasters strike, citing the Shares HF radio program, which FEMA relies on for emergency messaging. I even shared Mrs. Lopez's story, proving my radio wasn't the culprit. Then came the bombshell. I projected a slide of the Amateur Radio Parity Act, highlighting how HOAs can't ban effective outdoor antennas for emergency communications. Karen's face turned red. "This is irrelevant," she stammered. "Our rules are clear." But the board wasn't so sure. Mr. Chun, a board member and retired engineer, asked, "Are you saying FEMA depends on people like you?" I nodded, handing him a letter from my emergency team confirming my role. The room buzzed with whispers. Karen doubled down, insisting the antenna was unsightly and the fines would stand. That's when Mrs. Lopez stood up. "I blamed his radio for my baby monitor, but I was wrong," she said. "He fixed my problem in 10 minutes. Maybe we should listen to him." The crowd murmured in agreement. Another neighbor, a young dad, admitted his garage door opener had issues long before I moved in. The tide was turning. The board deliberated for an agonizing hour. When they returned, Mr. Chun spoke. "We're dismissing the fines," he said, "and we'll amend the covenants to allow amateur radio antennas, per federal guidelines." Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to protest, but the board cut her off. The room erupted in applause. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I wasn't done. I offered to host a workshop for neighbors, teaching them how ham radio works and how it protects our community. Most signed up on the spot. Karen's reign didn't end that night, but her influence crumbled. She resigned as HOA president a month later, citing personal reasons. Rumor has it she moved to a condo with no HOA, tired of the backlash. My antenna still stands, quietly monitoring FEMA frequencies like 17.650 MHz for emergencies. Last week, I got a thank you note from Mrs. Lopez, who joined my workshop and is now studying for her ham license. The neighborhood feels different now, less like a battleground, more like a team. This fight wasn't just about my radio. It was about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Amateur radio isn't just a hobby. It's a public service that saves lives when everything else fails. I learned that truth can outshine even the loudest complaints, and a community can rally when it sees the bigger picture. What do you think? Was I right to fight the HOA, or should I have taken down my antenna to keep the peace? Share your thoughts below.